She said he could leave when the rain stopped. It never did. I wasn't supposed to be at her house that morning. It was a last-minute job. A cabinet hinge that kept coming loose and a flickering light that had started bothering her in the kitchen. Simple enough. I'd handled bigger problems on far less sleep. But the moment she opened the door, I forgot every word I'd planned to say. Elena. Warm hazel eyes, the kind that noticed everything before she reacted. Soft lines at the corners that made her beauty feel lived in, not manufactured. She wore jeans and a loose sweater like she dressed for comfort, not company. And somehow that made her even more magnetic. "Thanks for coming," she said, brushing her hair behind her ear. Her voice carried that mix of confidence and apology you hear from someone used to doing everything alone. "No problem," I replied, trying not to stare. "Shouldn't take long." She smiled briefly, but enough to shift something in the air. The kitchen smelled like fresh coffee and citrus cleaner. Sunlight poured through a big window above the sink, catching in her hair every time she moved. I dropped my tool bag near the counter and crouched down to inspect the hinge, pretending the room didn't suddenly feel too warm. "Do you need anything?" she asked. "Just a screwdriver." She reached into a drawer beside me. When she handed it over, her fingers brushed mine. Light, unintentional, but electric all the same. I swallowed hard and kept working, hoping she hadn't noticed the way I froze for a second. "So, you do this full-time?" I shook my head. "Just helping out a friend's company until I finish school." "Oh? What are you studying?" "Architecture. I like fixing things now, building them someday." She liked that answer. I could tell by the way her eyes softened, like she saw more in me than I'd said. The cabinet didn't take long. Just a couple screws tightened, a new bracket to secure the frame. But I took my time anyway. I liked hearing her talk. I liked the way she leaned against the counter, arms folded, listening like my words mattered more than they should. When I finished, I stood up and tested the door one last time. Closed smoothly, perfectly aligned. "All set," I said. She crouched beside me to look, her shoulder brushing mine. "Wow, I've been dealing with that for weeks." There was pride in her voice, and gratitude too. She wasn't treating me like some kid doing odd jobs. She looked at me like a man who could help, who could handle things. "The light fixture?" I asked, gesturing upward. "Oh, right." She laughed softly. "Sorry, I'm distracting you." She wasn't. Not even close. I set up my ladder under the fixture, climbing just high enough to see her still watching me. Curious. Maybe a little intrigued. And that's when I realized something unexpected. I didn't want this job to end quickly. Not when she smiled like that. Not when being here felt this comfortable. Not when I hadn't yet figured out why her presence made the room feel entirely different. A simple repair. That's all it was supposed to be. But the moment she opened that kitchen door, something else started to open too. The light fixture ended up being an easy fix, a loose connector, nothing more. I should have wrapped up, packed my tools, and headed to my next stop. But as I climbed down the ladder, I saw the way she watched the kitchen brighten again. Like the return of steady light meant something to her. Like stability was a gift she hadn't felt in a while. She stood there with her hand lightly pressed to her hip, thinking. Then she looked up at me. "Could I ask you one more favor?" she said, her voice quieter, unsure. "Of course," I answered too quickly. She led me through a short hallway toward the stairs. The shift from the bright kitchen to the softly lit hallway made everything feel more private, more personal. The rain clouds outside were gathering, dimming the day even more. The window in my bedroom, it keeps getting stuck. She hesitated at the top step, suddenly self-conscious. "I mean, it just needs adjusting, I think." I nodded, pretending my heartbeat hadn't just picked up speed. Happy to take a look. Her bedroom wasn't what I expected. Not overly decorated. Not cold either. Just lived in. Soft grays and warm wood tones. A neatly made bed. A stack of books on the nightstand. A frame turned face down like a memory she wasn't ready to display anymore. She stood beside me as I tested the window. I groaned as I pushed, stuck tight. Definitely fixable. "I've been meaning to get it repaired," she said, arms crossing. Not in defense. More like she was hugging herself. I just keep putting things off. Life gets heavy sometimes, I said without thinking. She looked at me, surprised by how much I understood without prying. While I worked on the frame, I could feel her presence, even when she moved quietly. She wasn't hovering. She just didn't want to leave the space between us. Our shoulders almost touched every time she leaned in to see my progress. The closeness felt intentional, even if neither of us said so. I asked about her work. She ran an online interior design business. Laughed that she could transform other people's homes but struggled to handle the little problems in her own. You'd be surprised, I said. People who build beautiful things often forget they deserve beautiful lives too. The room fell silent for a second, the kind of silence that says everything we're not ready to speak out loud. That window should slide easier now, I murmured, testing it. She stepped closer. So close I felt her breath against my shoulder as she watched. When the glass finally moved smoothly along the frame, she let out a relieved sigh and rested her hand briefly on my back. Just a thank you, I told myself. Don't overthink it. But my skin still warmed under her touch long after she pulled away. She smiled, not big, but real. You've helped more than you know. I wanted to tell her she'd done the same for me, just by being here. But before I could say anything, thunder rumbled outside, deep and sudden. She glanced toward the window. Looks like the weather wants you to stay a little longer. There was something in her tone, a question hidden inside an invitation. And every part of me hoped the storm wouldn't pass too quickly. The thunder didn't ease up. It only grew louder, chasing rain across the sky in fast, angry sheets. From the bedroom window, I could see the street flooding in minutes, water racing toward the storm drains. My old car didn't stand a chance out there. You're not driving in this? She said firmly, the worry in her voice unfiltered now. I nodded. Yeah. Probably better to wait it out. There was relief in her shoulders when she heard that subtle, but there. She led us downstairs again, the house feeling different than before, quieter, more isolated, like the storm had wrapped us into our own private world. Tea? She asked. Sure, thanks. While she boiled water, I stood in the living room, taking in the soft lamp lighting, the framed art, the blanket neatly folded on the arm of the couch. Everything about her space felt warm, like she wanted comfort but rarely allowed herself to relax. When she returned, she handed me a mug, and our fingers brushed again. A little longer this time, a little harder to ignore. She sat beside me, not too close, but not far either. Just enough that if either of us leaned an inch, our sides would touch. You seem calm, she said with a soft smile. Most people hate storms. I kind of like them. They make the world slow down. That answer made her look at me a little longer than necessary, like she was memorizing something about me, something she wasn't expecting to find. What about you? I asked. Do storms bother you? She tucked her feet up on the couch, wrapping her hands around the mug. They used to. My ex, he traveled a lot. I hated being alone during nights like this. Her gaze dropped. Eventually, I just got used to the loneliness. The admission felt heavy and fragile. I wanted to break the weight of it without breaking her trust. You're not alone tonight, I said quietly. She smiled, small, grateful, almost shy. It was the first time she looked her age, not in a bad way, in a human way. A woman who'd carried too much strength for too long. Another thunder crack made the lights flicker. She didn't move, but her hand twitched like she almost reached for me. Almost. Mind if I sit a little closer? I asked. Her inhale caught. No. Please. I slid closer, our thighs finally touching through the fabric of our jeans. The warmth of her seeped into me, and suddenly the storm didn't feel loud anymore. It felt like background music to something far more intense. She laughed nervously, brushing her thumb over the rim of her cup. I didn't expect today to feel like this. Like what? I asked. She looked up and there was no pretending now. Like I'm enjoying your company a little more than I should. My pulse pounded, but I kept my voice steady. I'm not complaining. Lightning flashed. and though her face was shadowed again, her eyes stayed locked on mine. Curious, wanting, cautious. The storm kept pushing itself against the house, booming with the confidence of something that knew it controlled the night. Every flash of lightning brightened the room for a heartbeat before sinking us back into the golden glow of the lamp beside the couch. We sat closer now, close enough that I felt the faint tremble of her breath whenever thunder cracked. She set her tea down, fingers lingering around the handle as though grounding herself. "You're very easy to talk to," she murmured, eyes forward. "So are you." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Something deeper was swirling there, worry, maybe, self-doubt. A battle between wanting connection and fearing the cost of it. "Most people your age," she began, then stopped herself. "What?" I asked gently. She shook her head. "They wouldn't be here. Not sitting with me. Not noticing me." "I don't think you understand," I said, turning slightly toward her. "You're very hard not to notice." And I meant it, completely. Before she could respond, the lights flickered again, once, twice. Then everything went dark. She startled, gripping my arm instinctively. Her hand wrapped firm around my bicep, her body leaning into mine for a brief moment of forgotten caution. "It's okay," I whispered. "I'm here." She didn't pull away right away. When she finally did, she exhaled a shaky laugh. "Sorry. Old habits." "No need to apologize for reaching out," I said. "Everyone needs someone sometimes." Her silhouette shifted, turning toward me more fully. In the dimness, the only light came from the windows where lightning drew quick silver lines across her features. Her eyes wide, vulnerable, unguarded. "You must think I'm being ridiculous," she said. "I think you're being real." Pause followed, thick with unspoken things. The storm was loud, but the quiet between us was louder. She brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear, a nervous habit I'd already come to recognize. My hand moved before I could overthink, gently taking that same strand and smoothing it back for her. Her breath caught, sudden and soft. My fingertips grazed the side of her cheek. Warm, silky, so close to trembling. We held still like that, suspended in a moment neither of us wanted to name. Then the lights blinked back on, too bright, too fast. We both flinched slightly, caught between relief and disappointment. She blinked, regathering the distance she'd let fall away. She straightened her posture, hands pulled neatly into her lap like she needed to remind herself of boundaries. "I'm sorry," she whispered again, voice smaller now. "You keep apologizing for being human," I said with a gentle smile. "I hope you stop." She looked at me, really looked, as if deciding whether she deserved comfort from someone as young as I was. Thunder growled again, but she didn't jump this time. Our knees were still touching. Her hand stayed closer to mine than before, and the space between us felt like a question waiting to be answered. There are moments when a house goes dark, and suddenly you see everything clearly. Tonight was one of those moments. The lights hummed steadily again, but neither of us moved away. If anything, the brief darkness had loosened something, a thread that was already tugging between us. Elena looked down at her hands, twisting her thumbs. She wasn't fidgeting out of boredom. This was the kind of nervousness that comes when someone is debating whether to let themselves hope. "You're very kind," she said finally. "People usually don't look at me the way you do." She breathed out a laugh that held no real humor. "Not anymore." My chest tightened. "How do I look at you?" "Like I matter," she replied quietly. There it was, the truth she didn't mean to say out loud. A truth that had weight and history behind it. "Elena?" I said her name softly, letting it sit in the air between us. She toyed with the edge of the blanket beside her, eyes still lowered. "I spent years loving someone who barely saw me, and now that I'm alone, I don't know how to believe when someone actually does." I leaned closer, just enough that she could feel the sincerity in my presence. "You don't have to believe it right away," I whispered. "Just let me show you." That made her finally lift her gaze, and in those hazel eyes, I saw a storm far more complex than the one outside. Strength, fear, desire wrapped in caution. A tear threatened to gather at the corner of her eye, but she blinked it away before it could fall. She didn't want pity. She wanted honesty. I reached up slowly, giving her every chance to stop me, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. My knuckles brushed her cheek, and she didn't shy away. She leaned into the touch, just slightly. Her skin was warm beneath my fingertips. Her breath feathered against my wrist. Time paused, respectfully, as if the universe knew how important this moment was. "You deserve someone who sees you," I said. "Every day. In every light." She let out a shaky breath, one hand lifting as if pulled by instinct. Her fingers hovered over my chest, not yet touching, seeking permission. "You're so young," she whispered. "You could have anyone. Someone without my baggage." "I don't want anyone," I replied, placing my hand gently over hers, guiding it to rest against my heartbeat. "I'm here. With you." She closed her eyes at the contact, as if feeling my pulse gave her permission to feel her own again. When she opened them, the fear hadn't disappeared, but it had softened, replaced by something braver. "I forgot what it felt like," she murmured. "What?" I asked, even though I already knew. "To be wanted." I didn't kiss her. I didn't rush her. I simply held her hand against my chest, letting her feel the truth behind every word I'd spoken. Outside, the rain eased into a gentler rhythm. Inside, the real storm was finally beginning to calm. Not because the feelings were weaker, but because she'd stopped running from them. We stayed like that, quietly choosing closeness, letting the night unfold at a pace that felt like healing. Time slipped by without either of us noticing. The storm outside had mellowed into a gentle patter, like even the rain knew not to interrupt what was happening between us. Elena's hand was still on my chest, her fingers curled slightly into the fabric of my shirt. My heartbeat was unreasonably loud, and I wondered if she felt every uneven thud. Eventually, she pulled back just enough to search my face. Not out of uncertainty, but because she needed to understand what this moment meant to me. "You should probably get going," she whispered, though she sounded like she was trying to convince herself more than me. "Probably," I echoed, but neither of us moved. We stood from the couch at the same time, the shift leaving a strange emptiness between us that neither wanted. She walked me to the door, her steps slow, like each one was a countdown. The porch light flickered as she opened the door. The air outside was damp and cool, the kind that smelled like earth and new beginnings. Water still dripped steadily from the roof, forming tiny puddles on the concrete. "I really appreciate today," she said, her hands folding nervously in front of her. "More than you know." "I'm glad I was here," I replied, and that was the truth in its simplest form. She looked up, eyes tracing every part of my face as if memorizing it. I noticed her swallow, the slight tremble in her breath, the way her lips parted, like she was debating whether to voice the thought hovering in her silence. My hand lifted almost without permission, fingers brushing her elbow. A barely there touch, but enough for us both to feel the gravity behind it. "I'd like to see you again," I said. Her breath hitched. For a moment she didn't answer. Her gaze dropped, and when she looked back at me, it carried years of experience. All the caution that comes from having been disappointed before. "I'm afraid," she admitted quietly. "Afraid this is just a moment. Something you'll look back on and forget." I stepped closer, speaking softly into the space we shared. "I don't want a moment, Elena. I want whatever this is becoming." Her hand reached up, resting over the spot where my heart still beat too fast. The warmth of her palm seeped through me like truth. "You really mean that?" she asked. "I wouldn't be standing here if I didn't." The vulnerability that shimmered in her eyes then was beautiful and real. She nodded slowly, a decision made in her chest before reaching her lips. "Come back tomorrow," she whispered. "If you still want to." I smiled, letting the certainty show. "I will." Her hand lingered against me just a little longer, fingertips tracing a path they weren't ready to leave. "Good night," she said, with a softness that felt like a promise. "Good night," I returned. When I stepped into the night, I felt lighter and heavier, all at once. Because leaving wasn't the end. It was the first step toward coming back. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the way Elena looked at me before I left. Hopeful, terrified, and trying so hard not to show it. I replayed every word, every touch, every moment when silence spoke louder than speech. Morning arrived slow and hazy. The storm had washed the world clean. The air smelled like rain and beginnings. I stood outside her door again, this time without the safety of a work order or tools to hide behind. My hand hovered inches from the doorbell, nerves crawling through me. Then I heard the lock click from the inside. Before I could knock, the door opened. Elena stood there in a soft, cream-colored sweater and her hair loosely tied back. She looked rested, but the uncertainty still lingered in her eyes, waiting to see if I was truly here for her. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she admitted. "I wasn't sure I could stay away," I answered. That made her smile. Not the polite kind she used yesterday, but something deeper, like relief, like trust just beginning to root itself. She stepped aside. "Come in." The house felt brighter today. Or maybe I was seeing it differently. Her walls didn't feel like boundaries anymore. They felt like invitations. She poured 2 coffees, movements slightly shaky. I noticed. She knew I noticed. Neither of us mentioned it. "So," she began, voice gentle but guarded. "What does yesterday mean to you?" I took a breath, grounding myself in the truth that had driven me back here. "It means," I said, "that something real is happening, and I don't want to pretend it isn't." Her eyes softened. "Even though I'm older? Even though I'm complicated?" I reached across the counter, covering her hand with mine. "I'm not afraid of your life," I said. "I want to learn it." Her lips parted, not from surprise, but from finally being understood. She turned her hand over, letting our fingers weave together like they were meant to fit. "Tell me something," she whispered. "What do you want from this? From me?" I stepped around the counter so there was no barrier left between us. The morning light caught her face just right, revealing every honest line of strength and softness she carried. "I want to show you," I said, "that you're allowed to be loved again." She drew in a deep breath, the kind people take right before they let themselves jump into something fearless. Her free hand lifted to my cheek, warm and steady. I leaned into her palm without hesitation. "I don't know where this will go," she said. "I don't know how to do this perfectly." "Neither do I," I replied, smiling. "That's why we'll figure it out together." There was no rush, no urgency, just a quiet, certain step forward. She leaned in and pressed a soft kiss to my cheek, slow, lingering, meaningful enough to rewrite the ending of every yesterday she'd survived. When she pulled back, she whispered, "Stay, not because you have to, but because you want to." I squeezed her hand gently. "I'm not going anywhere." The future wasn't mapped out. There were still fears, still questions. But one thing was clear to both of us. Sometimes the strongest foundation begins with a heart that was broken, and someone patient enough to help rebuild it. Together, we walked further into her home, not as the handyman and the client. Be you. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and share it with someone who loves a slow burn romance. And subscribe for more heartfelt tales. You never know what love story might stay a little longer in your heart. T as 2 people choosing a new start.